Michael Werner, much of his life has revolved around progressive activism. He is the president of the Humanist Foundation, past president of the American Humanist Association, and adjunct faculty member of the Humanist Institute. He is an adjunct faculty member of, again, the Human Institute, and he's taught at the University of Chicago, if you heard us speaking earlier. He's also taught widely at major universities. He was one of the founders of Smart Recovery, which is a self-management and recovery training recovery program for folks that suffer from addiction. He teaches classes on ethics. Now, I've been trying to pronounce this correctly, and Michael, you can correct me when you grab the mic here. Epistemology?
Epistemology. That's
okay.
That's the study of what we know and how do we know it.
Thank you. I've already learned something then. And then addictions and humanism. He was a successful manager in the high-tech chemical business while enjoying the love of his partner and 3 children. And now he lives in the great city of Wilmington, North Carolina. And I am excited to hear what Michael has to say. If you've heard our commentary, we've talked a little bit about smart recovery, and I joke with Michael, and he knows it. He's joked back with me. I am 12-step biased, but I think as a clinician, I want to see what all is out there. I first learned about smart recovery when I moved here to Boston years ago in grad school. So I want to hear about another potential solution here that Michael's going to talk about. I do know, working with Michael over the last just couple of weeks getting ready, he is a very professional, prepared speaker, and judging from what I just read from his bio, he's going to have some great things to share with us today. Michael, without further ado, it's yours, sir.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Werner, and I'm glad to be here. When I was up in Chicago, I lived up there for 20 years, and that's why I started Smart Recovery. I had a guy came, one of our members came with a gambling addiction, and he had some problems, but he wasn't, it's what I talk about when people are playing with their addiction. They know they got a problem, but they're not really willing to settle down on it. But he did, to his credit, he did have himself banned from all the Illinois casinos. You can do that in Illinois, and I think a lot of other states, so that with face recognition, etc., if you get caught there, they can arrest you. But he had a relapse, and he got around that by driving 8 hours up to northern Wisconsin to a Native American casino there, spent 3 days there, didn't eat or drink the whole time because, oh my God, if you do that, you give enough time if you got to go to the bathroom. And when he got back, though, he had lost all of his money, not just all of his money, his house, his car, and even he spent his IRA savings. He was then ready to settle down and start working on it. Remember this, today the gambling industry is very powerful. There is $40 million a year spent on just trying to figure out better ways to get you to stay in front of and use a slot machine. They analyze everything, exactly what type of bells, whistles, the lights, the frequency, the timing. It's all meant to give a mesmerizing experience for you. One of the things that they found is that a near miss counts just as much as a real hit. And what I mean by that, if you're looking at a slot machine and you've got cherry, apple, but there's a cherry right below the apple, that counts as a near miss. People go, oh, I almost got it. So you think, oh, well, I'll do that all the time. But no, they found it doesn't work either. They found the magic number is 70%. If you give 70% near misses and maybe 1 or 2% wins, people will stay there. So it's very sophisticated and very powerful science-driven technology to keep you gambling. One of the things I'm going to emphasize here is that behavioral disorders are the same as use disorders. They are similar in both cause and cure. That's why in Smart Recovery, we don't care what kind of addiction you've got, we're going to handle it, because the same tools are used for all of them. Synergistically, about 30 years ago, I started this about 30 years ago, a lot of people came together, the top researchers, civil libertarians, psychologists. Tom Horvath was president of the American Psychological Association for Addictions at that time, and he became our first president. Our present president, somebody came on board then too, Joe Gerstein, who was dean of Harvard Medical School. Virtually all the top researchers are part of our program. And one of the things we came about, was upsetting to many of us, is that just about everything we know about addictions is wrong. Not just wrong, but dangerously wrong. 75% of people get over alcohol addiction all on their own. And that came from the original Valiant study, the Harvard Valiant study, long-term people, and many other studies. George Bush and his ex-opponent, Ann Richards of Texas, governor of Texas, are two examples who just got tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired and quit. That is the normal route to recovery. Also, people talk about you have to be spiritual to, you have a spiritual deficit. That's why you're using. But if that's true, then why is it that 50% of the priests by the Catholic Church's own studies are shown to be alcohol dependent? And I imagine they are pretty spiritual. People talk about powerless, but if you're powerless, how does anybody recover then? No, everybody has control over that first drink, that first hit, that first injection. Now after that, it's off to the races, but everybody's got control over that first use. And especially for you out there, a therapist, traditional talk therapy not only is ineffectual, can actually have a negative effect. Why is that? The reason is that you start believing their lies, their rationalizations, their excuses. Oh, I drink because, I saw my mother and father drink when I was young, or I was abused as a child, and everything else. Well, your mother and father have been dead for 30 years, so why are you still doing that? No, the reason we start using is different than we keep using. We keep using because the monkey's on our back. And if you don't go at the core issue, rather than what started people using, you're going to have problems. Smart recovery has grown exponentially recently, especially worldwide. We're in 27 countries, and 7 more are getting started right now. Our biggest problem is trying to keep up with the demand. Our workbook has been translated into 24 languages, including ancient Australian Aborigine. Over 500 meetings in England, 400 in Scotland. Last year I was in Copenhagen, and there's 40 meetings in Copenhagen alone. Australia, it's the preferred method. In the USA, our smart recovery is the preferred method under the name Inside the Walls. We had to change the name in federal prisons and in several state penitentiaries, including California and Texas. Last year, Texas did a side-by-side study, and they actually cut the study off early, 2/3 of the way through, because the results were so dramatic with smart recovery. California last year ordered 8,000 of our workbooks. In Wilmington, where I live, Wilmington, North Carolina, Wilmington Treatment Center is the big dog here, and they've always been traditionally straight 12-step with nothing else. But last year, they went with a dual program where you could start and go into either a 12-step or a smart recovery program. Of course, like everybody else, it's been pretty much shut down right now because of the COVID crisis. One thing I'll point out, the studies have shown, I'll just cut to the chase on something. Harvard Medical School's Division on Addictions and Gaming Industry, a great research organization, has found that cognitive behavioral therapy and especially rational emotive behavioral therapy are the best therapies for gambling addiction. Virtually all the top researchers, as I mentioned, are involved with smart recovery because we're evidence-based. We are not just evidence-based, we're science-based. Mark Lewis, and that's Mark with a C, is good to go on YouTube sometime and see his YouTubes on how addictions occur. And actually, what's interesting, he's the top neurobiologist, neuropsychologist on addictions, but he came through smart recovery to get over his own opioid addiction. One thing I'm going to point out is our goal, though, is not abstinence. Yes, we're abstinence-based, but our real goal is to give people's life back to them so that they flourish. And I don't use the word flourish lightly. In philosophy, we have found that the word eudaimonia, the Greek word eudaimonia, used to be considered as happiness or pleasure. In recent years, it's changed. It means flourishing because people don't want just happiness. They want authenticity to their life. They want something way beyond just mortal existence and existing. Think about it this way. If it was just happiness, we'd shoot up with heroin all the time. Or think about Neo, the guy in Matrix. Remember him? If you've seen the movie Matrix, he had to choose between a red pill and a blue pill. The blue pill represented staying in the Matrix and being consumed with beautiful happiness and peace and tranquility and bliss his whole life. Or he could choose the red pill, getting out of the Matrix and choosing all the problems and vicissitudes of life, but being authentic. He chose the red pill, as most of us do. So our goal isn't just abstinence, it's giving people's life back to them from the slavery of addiction. Now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to try and put the my PowerPoint on. And I'll show this later, but if any of you have any questions, I have my phone number and my email there. You can contact me. I am available for training in North Carolina. SMART is an acronym for Self-Management and Recovery Training. It's a national and now worldwide nonprofit network of self-help groups. Our meetings are free, open to the public. We offer a self-help alternative to traditional 12-step recovery programs. Our purpose is to help free people gain independence from addictive behavior. We are abstinence-based, but unlike some programs, we do allow people who are still using, they want to come, as long as they're not using when they come, to be in our program. Our groups are organized and run by volunteer coordinators and advisors. The coordinators facilitate the meeting, and they may or may not be mental health professionals, but they are all trained. They have to go through training. Professional advisors are mental health professionals who are responsible for training, administrative support, etc. We also have a national, and now 2 years ago, we developed a worldwide board of directors because we're booming so much overseas. We believe that by managing beliefs that lead to undesired emotions and behaviors, individuals can achieve abstinence. This approach views addictions as a response maintained by biopsychosocial factors. A lot of different factors, but we talk about biopsychosocial factors typically. It's supported by research on relapse prevention, motivational enhancement, and behavioral change processes. Number one, we emphasize self-responsibility, self-motivation, and self-discipline as the primary means of stopping substance abuse. Spirituality and religion are respected as personal matters that may help an individual abstain, but we don't support them and are not methods we offer within Smart Recovery. I will say this though, many times people say, oh, you got to get spiritual in order to get over your addiction. I think it's putting the cart before the horse. When you're addicted, with the monkey on your back and it's screaming at you, it's hard to think of anything that's important. I think you should focus primarily on your addiction, and then you can deal with those aspects of life that are most meaningful, most joyful, the things that give you power and meaning and joy in your life. And that's what we're trying to do, is restore that to people. Our focus is on the addictive process, not the addictive substance. And actually on the religion issue, keep in mind too, today, 26% by the Pew study on the National Sociological Study, 26% of the people in the United States are non-religious. 39% of the millennials, the 19 to 29-year-olds, are non-religious. So if we don't want to alienate those people and give them a choice and all the other religions and everything else, we need to have it a program where we respect all people's religion and avoid those conflicts. We don't use sponsors. We don't want to build any new dependencies. We not only allow crosstalk, just like a regular therapy group, we encourage crosstalk. This is not a lifetime program. SMART does not strive to transfer dependence on chemicals or behavior or dependence on meetings. Labels like addict or alcoholic, we're not encouraging those. If people want to use them, that's fine. But you know, labels stick, they're sticky. And we want to build a new identity, one that says I'm sober and free of alcohol or the other behavioral addictions like gambling and moving on in my life. We hope to inspire individuals rather than convince them of their powerlessness. Because if you say you're powerless, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Those that say they can and those that say they can't will both in the end be right. Smart Recovery views all the other abstinence-based programs as helping individuals reach a common goal, and will refer people to any program that meets their individual needs. And we think that Smart Recovery, AA, NA, and GA are not mutually exclusive. And as I was mentioning earlier, the studies show that one of the best things you can do to up your chances of recovery is to join a group. But it doesn't even matter what group. It can be sewing group or whatever, but be in a group where you can share your experiences and be with other people. Let's talk about gambling disorder in particular. DSM-5 first categorized gambling as an impulse control disorder in 1980. Of those with a gambling disorder, 75% have an alcohol use disorder and 38% have a drug use disorder. So the tools we use, since we don't discriminate what type of addiction a person may have, be it a substance or behavior, we treat all of those people with the same thing. The core morbidity is very high. Gamblers Anonymous, to be blunt, has only 8% abstinence after 1 year and 7% after 2 years. And as you probably well know too, treatment programs for substance use disorders are only 20 to 35% effective. And it's not to denigrate these programs. My point here is to say we are only at the beginning. We should be very humble. We need a lot more research and based on evidence-based programs of what really works. The Iowa Gambling Test is a tool that you might want to be able to use. It quantifies damage to the decision-making area of the prefrontal cortex. People that have had damages to the prefrontal cortex, like the famous case of Phineas Gage, etc., have had get involved with gambling a much higher percentage. Also, we will find later that gambling itself damages the prefrontal cortex. People with amygdala damage typically will choose high risk, high reward options. So we have to be aware about that. We have long known that people with Parkinson's disease and other low dopamine disorders have a high proclivity towards gambling addictions. There's also people with have a predisposition for impulsivity and reward-seeking behaviors are prime candidates to get into gambling disorders. Today, it's estimated 2 million people have a gambling behavior disorder. In Smart Recovery, we have a 4-point program. First of all, we're trying to build motivation. Second of all, we're trying to help people deal with their copings and cravings with urge management. Second, problem solving. This is really important with gambling because people are making really bad, frankly, just rational decisions about gambling. And that's where REBT comes into play. And then we're seeking to get people to move from their short-term wants to long-term needs. Smart Recovery is recognized and has affiliations with all the major organizations. And in fact, most of these organizations highly support us. First of all, we say that the locus of control is your brain. The locus of control isn't somebody out there, a sponsor or a book or anything else. It's a 2.5-pound organ between your ears. And that's where the battle is going to be won, or let's be blunt, it can be lost there. We don't think you're powerless. We think you're the only person who we know is in control. Responsibility, ultimately it's yours. Yes, the group helps, etc., but we're trying to push that responsibility back to the individual. The decision to use is ultimately, as I mentioned, a choice. Yeah, after that first hit or use, it's off to the races, but everybody's got control over that first use. Sponsors, we don't have any because we don't want to build any new dependencies. Genes, even though there's some statistical bias, biology is not destiny, and the vast majority of people with markers do not become addicted. Personality, many studies have been done about this. There's no scientific evidence that there's the so-called addictive personality. Yes, after you become addicted, your personality changes. But I view addictions as equal opportunity exploiters. Those people that are the rich, the poor, the smart, the not so smart, the introverts, the extroverts, they are all susceptible. How? The vast majority we know from the data get over addictions all by themselves. So we're trying to use those techniques that people use in their daily lives to get over addictions normally, what's called natural recovery, and apply it to our group therapies. Now this is dealing with Prochaska and De Cameletti's stages of change. You probably already know this. If you don't, you should. The stages of change are showing stages that most people go through any kind of change, whether you're trying to stop biting your nails or stop going to the casino. What we're looking at here is stages that each stage has a resistance going to the next stage though. So, you know, we need to move it along. If you are a therapist, then you should be looking at what is your success in moving people up onto stages. If you're a manager of a treatment facility, this is a way to not only look at your patients there, but also the clients, but also what are you doing, what are your therapists doing to be successful with people. The pre-contemplative stage is saying, well, I don't have a problem, do I? It's the denial stage. Most people that come into our group aren't in the pre-contemplative stage. They know that. The ones that do are ones that are mandated by the courts, or maybe they're pushed by their family. The contemplative stage is where people know they've got a problem, but they're ambivalent about it. You know, sometimes they want to quit, and sometimes they don't. It's really not denial. They know they've got a problem, but they're ambivalent. It's sort of like being on the fence. But the fence, as one of our clients said, it's not like being on a smooth, like one of these round log fence. No, it's like a razor blade. You're very uncomfortable sitting on it. The next stage is the preparation stage, where you're really trying to learn now, what are the tools I can use to gain my own recovery? The action stage is where you're actually working with these tools in your life. The maintenance stage is where you're practicing. I've heard it said, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an interesting story, that Michael Jordan used to shoot 1,000 buckets a day until he was totally arm weary. The reason is, when you get arm weary, you start short shooting, and he wanted to be prepared at the end of the game to not short shoot and make the plays. In our case, we want to practice so we build up our mental muscles so that when the urge comes, it's automatic. We get an immediate response, like putting a hand on a hot stove. We know what to do. We know how to deal with it 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And then we want people to move on. Now, that doesn't mean that they might relapse. And if they relapse, they can come back to an earlier stage. I kind of view smart recovery is a toolkit. You know, like you go in a garage, you know, you don't have just a pliers or a screwdriver, a hammer. You need all the different tools, and these are all of our tools. All of these tools have been shown to be effective scientifically. We know they work. Now they work, some of them work better at different stages of recovery than others, but all of them have effect throughout generally the whole lifetime of a recovery. But keep in mind that some people may focus on one or two of them, that they're really, really important to them. We're not going to have time today to go through each one of these in detail, but I will tell you, we do have these in our workbook, which is available for $10 online. Very, very good. It's a workbook. It makes you do things. And then we also have online. We have a lot of these tools. We don't trademark anything so that it's all free for everybody. you can imagine, like the ABCs on REBT, these are effective for all kinds of emotional disturbances, like depression, anxiety, things like that. Carlo De Cameletti, I was in a conference last year, and he's the one that did the stages of change. But also, he's the #1 person, another guy too, looking at the long-term factors for sobriety success. And he did a meta-study, a whole study of studies, and he also did his own research on this. He has found that, and like I say, he did the long-term study because there's a lot of people who study short-term. Anybody can get people cleaned up short-term, a week, a month, even a year. But it's the long-term that's really important. So he found that these are the most important factors for sobriety success. This isn't anecdotal or what people may think they believe. This is what scientifically works. Coping skills. How do you deal with life's travails, ups and downs? And cognitive behavioral therapy is particularly good for that. Self-efficacy. This is what we focus on. Reinforcing choice and, more important, responsibility. Long-term commitment. Yes, not day at a time, long-term commitment. And it actually is the #1 factor. Long-term commitment doesn't mean that you can't fail, because if you fail, you're going to pick yourself up. It says what I'm committed to as a plan long-term. Day at a time, yes, you need day at a time when you're first getting out, especially when you're detoxing. But after that, we want to be moving people to long-term commitment. And it's interesting what happens. I've seen this over 30 years, many times. People say, yeah, I'm going to quit and everything else, but we know in our hearts that they're still not totally committed. But a day will come and you will know, they will know, everybody in the group will know that they mean it when they say, I will never use again. When they do that, it's sort of like a religious epiphany. The monkey's off their back, the shoulders lifted. It's no more fighting with themselves. They wake up in the morning not wondering, well, is this a using day or not using day? No, they don't wake up. They know what they're going to be doing. A decision has already been made. We want to move people to that because all the studies keep showing that as the #1 factor for long-term sobriety. Decision-making skills. This is particularly important with gambling because people are making very, very poor decision-making skills. Even though they might make some good decision-making skills originally, like at poker, etc., they start really goofing up. One guy said he was up $100,000 on online poker and then just pissed it all away because he didn't care what he did. He'd go all in on stupid things because he got tired and it didn't matter. The monkey again was on his back just to keep playing. Planning. We want to help people set short, medium, and long-term goals. And you need all three. Short-term meaning like this week, what are you going to do? In medium term, the next few months, and then long-term, the rest of your life. We also want to reduce the temptation and craving, those messages to use. We're exceptionally good at that with our tools. And we want to see an adequate completion of stage tasks. Again, the most important factors, the three most important factors, study after study keep showing: long-term commitment, changing the environment. If you keep going to the bar or the casino and just to be with your buddies and everything else, drink a Coke or something, guess what's going to probably happen? Now, maybe later on you're going to be able to have the strength and everything. It's not going to be a problem. But early on, you really want to change your environment. And lastly, management of the triggers of the cues. You have to have some tools available so that when the message is to use, that monkey gets on your back, you need to have some tools ready to be able to handle those. I throw this in there because the compulsion curve shows that, addictions aren't an either-or situation. It's a spectrum of use and compulsion to use. As you see, you start off with experimental habituation to use and then to a full-scale addiction. And it's always important you kind of determine where people are in that spectrum of use. On addiction, full-scale addiction, I've been doing this 30 years. Guess how many people I've seen be able to use moderation on their drinking or drug use? Zero. Never. I've had a lot of people, hundreds of people try. I've never seen anybody can actually do it. Studies do show that 1–2% of people may be able to, but I have some problems with some of those studies. They may not be totally true. What are addictions? This is important for us. Addictions, as I mentioned, are caused by a complex mixture of many factors, biopsychosocial, all of them interacting and interconnected. But the cure, though, is the power of your own brain. So we want to separate, though, the cause of an addiction from the cure. We want to separate the reasons one started behavior and why one continues using it. I'll give you an example. Some people may start using to self-medicate for alcohol addiction with they're self-medicating for depression with alcohol. But guess what? They become more depressed as they go along. But they keep telling themselves the old lie that it's helping when it's not. And they know that. Some people may start because it's party time. They learned it from their buddies and it's all party time. But then they end up using alone. So the reason we start using, again, is different. We keep using. You keep using because the monkey's on our back. And gambling and other behavioral disorders operate on the brain in the same way that substance use disorders do. We can actually see the brain changes. Now, this is from NIDA, and it shows the causes of gambling addiction. They break it down to 3 modes. One is the neurochemistry, the dopamine, the pleasure chemical, the one that gives us motivation to do things, is one aspect. But then with gambling especially, there's the cognitive thinking is askew. I talked about the near misses. You see that over here. And then we also talk about the illusion of control, like, oh, I can will an ace to come my way. And then there's probability weighting. In probability weighting, it's things like, you know, I really believe that there's such thing as a win going on, and I've got a run going on. Well, no, there's, you know, it's just luck of the draw, frankly. It's all statistics. And lastly, the neural circuitry. We're going to be talking about that next. What actually changes in the brain biologically? Here's I'm showing the dopamine pathways and the serotonin pathways. This is part of what is called the pleasure circuit. And we're going to be talking about this, and I hope this isn't boring you for some of you that might be familiar, because I think it's important. Our brain developed over millions of years an amazingly effective organ to help us survive and reproduce, the 2 main features of evolution. We have highly developed behavioral adaptations hardwired into our brain, especially the old brain. Our behavior is founded on both nature and nurture, and they are interactive, interconnected, and impossible to tease apart. There's over 100 trillion synapses in the brain, more than all the stars in the universe. That's why it's so complicated. Evolution is very efficient, though, and our behaviors, whether we realize it or not, we are subconsciously driven towards those 2 goals of survival and reproduction. We find those instinctual pre-wired drives play a key role in substance and behavioral disorder, commonly referred to as addictions. We need to demystify addictions so that we have a clear picture that the addictive process is a normal, understandable one to which we are all susceptible. We know that the primary source of substance and behavioral disorder is in the automatic limbic brain. Our brain is segmented in the older limbic brain where our basic survival, reproduction skills are hardwired into us. And the old brain, sometimes called the reptilian brain, motivates us to eat, survive, reproduce, and bring up our young. Part of this complicated process is we have chemicals called neurotransmitters that make the connection between the nerve synapses and thereby transmit and create our behavior by providing motivation. The body normally produces endorphins, which are your own type of opioids, that provide rewards for behavior, which increases survival and reproduction. Dopamine is sometimes referred to as the motivation or feel good or reward chemical. It's a neurotransmitter involved in producing pleasurable motivations, and in effect gives us the buzz in the nucleus accumbens, which you can see on this. It motivates us to do things Dopamine produced in the VTA, the ventral tegmental area, are sent throughout the brain. That complex pathway is sometimes called the pleasure circuit, fed by the VTA dopamine pump. Dopamine sent to the nucleus accumbens gives us the pleasurable effects, the buzz, and induces us to perform certain behaviors. Addictive drugs and behaviors like gambling flood the reward pleasure system with dopamine, and we learn to rely on that high. Unlike normal pleasurable experiences like food and sex, addictive drugs and behaviors give a huge burst of dopamine to the nucleus accumbens. At the same time, a learning process is activated as dopamine influences the amount of dopamine and tries to adjust what's called homeostatic balance. The brain knows that these high amounts of dopamine are not good for us and adapts, though, by decreasing the amount of natural dopamine. It does this by pruning some of the dendrites sending and receiving dopamine. Thus, the brain impairs our ability to recognize healthy rewards because the number of receptor sites is reduced. This results in us feeling less elated, and we need our drug or behavior just to feel any pleasure, and this is why we crave. We maintain and then increase our use just to feel normal, and over time, we gradually increase our toleration and need more and more of the addictive behavior or substance to get the same high. After a while, we never get back to our original normal pleasurable state. Many people report that trying to get back to their first high, with neural pruning, the compulsion grows though, craving grows, and tolerance grows. Dopamine is also part of the central part of the memory of pleasurable experiences. Substances and behavioral disorders are a form of, and this is important, maladaptive learning. We remember how much we like being high or winning a jackpot at one time. Dopamine creates pleasant memories that we associate with that drug or experience. The memories of a drug or gambling experience are completely powerful. These memories become triggers leading to craving when we encounter persons, places, or things that we associate with the pleasure response. The prefrontal cortex, the rational part of our brain, regulates our behavior. It becomes the executive function or rational thinking part of the brain to be able to evaluate options for our behavior. But this thinking area of the brain has become compromised, and with an addiction is one of the reasons we start making bad decisions, especially with gambling. Literally, the prefrontal area starts to shrink. In gambling, they've seen it shrink, believe it or not, 20 to 25%. Many people will tell you that we are powerless with an addiction, but that is too extreme. Let's just say that a substance or behavioral disorder impairs judgment, decision-making, and our impulse control. Using brain scan techniques, and we'll see this later, we can see both reduced activity and development in the prefrontal cortex. The rational messages that say, this is just screwing me up, are swamped out by the old limbic brain saying, I've got to have it. The craving we feel with an addiction, though, it's not on the same level as a food hunger. But the neurotransmitter serotonin has a function to make you feel satiated or full. It produces a calm, pleasant state. Curiously, though, the serotonin levels drop when we use, and we use more and more. And this is why we never seem to get full, not like eating a steak. This is, in effect, why the 3-day gambling or cocaine binge is so common. It's totally understandable as the person keeps using until they physically crash at the end. These mad cycles result in a roller coaster effect where one never gets back to feeling quite right. Our homeostatic regulation of neurochemicals is thrown off. Taking away the artificial stimulants results in anxiety, and the body wants to keep the balance of dopamine. The body literally thinks it's in danger if it doesn't have a normal balance of neurochemicals. The urges that ensue are the body's protective mechanism gone dangerously self-destructive, ringing an alarm for more and more chemicals. Our discussion, the body literally thinks it will die if it doesn't get the addictive substance or behavior. My point of all of this is to take away some of the mystification and guilt about addictions and see that the addictive response is a quite normal biochemical response. Other changes occur also as one becomes addicted. The rational brain knows we're hurting ourselves, but it's swamped out by the survival mechanisms of the old brain. All behavioral addictions, like compulsive gambling, binge eating, sexual behavior, internet gaming, and compulsive shopping, all show the same biological changes in the brain using FTI, MRI, and other techniques. And some people say, why don't you just quit or get some willpower, or it's just a bad habit. These are simplistic statements not in tune with the latest scientific thinking, or I suspect your own experience. They indeed have some truth, but the whole truth is more complicated. The limbic brain is telling us we will die if we don't get more of the addictive substance or behavior. This is why we do all the stupid stuff we do when we are addicted. We give up friends, family, money, our jobs, self-respect, because of the survival instinct. And we don't want to give that up. We let the urge to use control our better judgment. The biopsychosocial model sees many influences that help bring about and sustain addictive behavior. The multiple influences of family, biological changes, genetic biological makeup, sociological environment, psychology, friends, and yes, indeed, our own conscious agency all bring about where we are today with an addiction. Now here's a slide that shows what happens with addictions, and you can see that it lights up the old brain. The old brain is lit up with gambling addiction when we expect to win, and decreases when we expect the loss. I gave a biological model. I'm going to give a psychological model. You can see I'm not a very good artist here, but we have an old brain, as you know. We have a neocortex cap over it. As an addiction progresses, we get that message out of the old brain, says, give it to me now. Marvin Minsky, the father of artificial intelligence, came up with the theory of concept of a society of minds. We don't have just one mind. We have all kinds of minds going on all at once. We also have the message that says, this has done nothing but screw me up. And notice that I drew the old brain messages, super highway out of the old brain. Here are some of the aspects about bad cognition that people use to keep going with gambling, and that we can help with cognitive behavioral therapy. Just remember this, if you don't remember anything else, after one is severely addicted, any message to use or put yourself in a position to use is a lie. The rationalizations, the lies and excuses, the bullshit, frankly, don't make us use, but give us an excuse to keep using. Smart Recovery, we have a no excuses program. And this program works by knocking down the excuses and building up the rational message to quit. Remember this, we relapse for only one reason. We believe a lie. People are affected by things, not their view of them, Epictetus said. And then Albert Ellis, who is my mentor, said, people act as they feel and feel as they think, and thus people essentially act as they think. And again, we worry about the process, not the substance or activity. Basic REBT principles are events don't make us feel good or bad. It's our perception of events that result in our feeling good or bad. And perception events also influence our behavior. I had a fellow, for example, who was in the inner city in Chicago, but came out to, he loved a group out in the suburbs. He would drive 2 hours in and back on the Eisenhower 10 road at rush hour and fight all the traffic. He came in there one night and he's complaining, oh my God, it's horrible. This guy's cut me off and this guy cut me off. It was terrible the whole way, all angry. And somebody said, well, what book is it written that thou should not cut off Jeff? Of course, there's no book. The reality is that all people are going to be, there's going to be some people that are going to be jerks, most of the people. So next week he came in and he came in laughing. Same events happen. He said, but I counted like, it was like 1% of the people. Most of the people were pretty decent, but 1% of the people were jerks and cut him off. 2 weeks ago, you guys had a program I know on ABCs. This is the most powerful tool that we use for getting rid of addictions. If you keep doing this consistently, it will work and people's use will return. And here's an example. The wife is gone for the weekend. The irrational belief is, I'll just have one. She'll never know. And the consequences, if I get drunk again and I'm depressed. The disputation of those irrational beliefs, remember, any belief they use is a lie. We're going to dispute those. I'll just have one? No, I never seem to just have one anymore. And she won't know. Well, she probably will find out, but eventually will know. And more important, I will know. And is this what I really want? We work on vocabulary changing. All the vocabulary on the left side are the vocabulary of absolutes. I can't stand it. Of course you can stand it. I need to have a drink. I need to go to the casino. No, you don't need to. You want to. We also, the most important tool we use at the beginning of addiction, when people first come in, is the cost-benefit analysis. We don't have time to discuss that here. Motivational interviewing uses a tool of Socratic questioning. You can't, as you know, as therapists, you can't tell anybody to stop. You can't say stop using. No, you have to put a mirror to people. All therapy is a mirror to people and increasing self-awareness. So we ask questions like, well, how did it go last weekend at the casino? Did you win? Did you lose? How did you feel? How did your wife feel about it? This disarm tool is complicated. I don't want to get into it here, but I do want to point out we have resources. Smartrecovery.org, we have a lot of resources there. We have a library. We have face-to-face meetings all over the country and world now. We have the best online groups and worldwide, and 2:30 in the morning, you might be on somebody from Uzbekistan, Iran, or China, who knows. We have a family and friends using the CRAFT program, which again is a science-based program of how to handle people. And we just trained 300 volunteers on that. We also have a volunteer chat board where all the professionals and the volunteer leaders get on there, and a lot of great information. We also have conventions, and as somebody, actually Carlo De Cameletti said, this is like the who's who of all addictions research here. I'm going to leave it open right now to questions that people may have. And Robbie, if you can help us out on that.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Mike. Very interesting stuff. We do already have a couple of questions, and I do want to ask, and just so you know, for the academics out there, we got a question about, I know you taught at colleges, right? We just had a question about what your educational background is. Is it in psychology? I think you.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm a chemist. I ran a $270 million chemical business.
All right.
High-tech
Okay.
adhesives.
Yeah.
85% of your medical adhesives, food packaging adhesives, and almost all of your industrial adhesives for solar film and things like that. I ran that worldwide business. But on the side, I was also teaching philosophy, and I'm been leader in a lot of other areas. I'm published on philosophy, etc.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering.
But I was trained by Albert Ellis himself.
Yeah, right. Wonderful. Yeah. And I'm sure chemistry is going to help you with the brain circuitry, which I felt that portion was very interesting to me. And then I'm going to get my question out, which was someone else's.
I'm a research junkie. I've got file drawers filled with all the research. You know, I have four filing cabinets, four four-drawer filing cabinets filled with research on addictions.
I wanted to ask too, and this comes from outside too, but I had this question written down myself about, and you might have said this, and forgive me if you did, Mike, up front. Does Smart Recovery have like a book, like the other 12 steps?
Our members book is $10 online. It's extremely good, even if you're not going to use Smart Recovery, because it has all kinds of tools you can copy and use. And most of these tools are the toolkit that I mentioned that I had a buzz through. I'm sorry, but it's online as well.
Nice. Okay. And I do want to ask too, I forgot to ask you this. I was going to do this offline, but we've had a few folks ask about the PowerPoint do you mind sending that? We have those available for folks who
Yeah, yeah,
talk.
you can
Okay.
send that to people.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, yeah, I'll get that
If you
afterwards.
want, when I was speaking about the causes of addiction, I have a write-up on that I can send you as well if people are
Okay.
interested.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. So it'll be available, everyone, on the UNC website. Now, does brain circuitry? It sounds like part of recovery, or part of the process of smart recovery has to do, of course, with brain and brain circuitry. Is a lot of that psychoed, if you will, part of working with others in the group? When you're working with somebody who comes into smart recovery, is a lot of the talk about how the brain works, brain circuitry, and some of the
No,
talk that
not
you went
really.
through. Yeah.
Sometimes because people come in and they literally are saying, well, I'm a bad person and all this stuff. We try to get them over. One of the tools that we use that Albert Ellis developed, and actually I have written extensively on philosophy, is kind of considered universal uh, USA, unconditional self-acceptance. I talk about in my philosophy, and I write about, my core philosophy on ethics is affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and that includes yourself. And I go on a long discourse on that. I taught courses on that alone. You know what I'm saying? But that's what we're trying to do, is build up people's responsibility, because they're so beaten down. They don't need to be beaten down anymore.
Right.
They don't need to be hurt. Talk about what we don't do drunk lugs, by the way. We know you've been bad. We know you got all kinds of problems. Just tell us the basic facts, why you're here, how we can help you, what your support system is like, and then we move on. Then later on, if they are really screwed up about that, then I'll talk about this biological. I'm talking about the biology and the neuropsychology for all of you therapists out there, so that you can understand as a background information. Again, the cause is not the cure, but it gives you a background information so you don't go down false avenues.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. Scotty asked, so if it's the reptilian brain that takes over, then is the idea that rational approach will tame the reptile? Does the reptile brain even understand that language?
Well, Socrates talked about the horse and rider. The horse is the wild, extravagant. Nietzsche talked about the Dionysian and Apollonian. It's the wild, exciting emotions, and the horse, the rider, has to keep it under control. But also, you don't want to completely control the horse. You want to have its head, but you don't want it running off a cliff or into a tree. So that's what we have to do. We don't want to totally kill emotions. We want to tame them so that we don't go off on the dangerous ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. And Jennifer, you've got a great comment here. And we talked a little bit about this in the opening. And you and I have even talked about this a little bit, Mike, but she says, I'd like to recommend this to clients who are not willing to do other self-help groups, especially due to religion and spirituality. So that might be a nice fit, for folks. And even in my personal life, I know people who one guy in particular that perhaps the smart recovery thing might be a better fit. But I think it's all about somewhat fitting and whatever's going to work for that person to save them from I think the one thing that we all do agree on, whether what 12-step group or no 12-step group or what therapy works or what have you, is this is a nasty condition, whether you call it a disease, a disorder, or what have you, right? And whatever is going to best fit for long-term recovery to save their lives and their souls, if you will, is what's best. Yeah.
One of the things I tell people is if they come into our group and they're ready to quit, frankly, just about anything will work. When people come into AA or Smart Recovery or whatever, when they're ready to quit, anything will work. We're just trying to make it easier, sure, maybe even a little bit more fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's one of those things where we have to be careful that we don't think that we're all the be all and end all. We have to have a bit of humility. And as I pointed out, the results that we're doing right now out there in the addiction field are atrocious. They're not even good. They're atrocious, and we need to get better tools and methods.
Yeah, we've got another comment here from Valerie. Thank you. A lot of information to cram in less than an hour. So she asked you to come back. Yeah, so that I would view that as a compliment. So we've got a lot of people thanking you. And let's see here. Janet says that she uses the cost benefit and the ABCs often in her groups. And a lot of folks look like they enjoyed it. And something else too came to mind, Mike. I know people who haven't done anything and lived without their were able to not I mean, that's not recommended, especially for me, but some people, they just stopped. And
Well,
that's
that is
a reality too.
natural recovery is normal. Here's
Yeah.
something that's really the biggest study on addictions ever was the match study. I was involved with it. The $23 million study of the government matching 3 different types of therapy. After they got done with the therapy, just about anything they did worked, frankly. 40% success. But here's what's interesting. They went back and looked at the people that they had, that they evaluated, but they didn't go into the therapy. Guess what? They had 65% success rate. In other words, not doing any kind of therapy was actually better. This is what's scary.
Yeah. Well, this broadens our fishing net, if you will. I think makes our toolbox a little bit stronger as clinicians. No matter if you are biased like I am, or anyone else, I think this is going to help. Again, it's going to make your toolbox a little bit bigger, and it's going to, as far as options, potential options, and I think too, it's going to make that net.
Well, we don't want to disenfranchise. We don't want to disenfranchise anybody. We want everybody to feel comfortable. Right. And if you start talking about religion to some people, then you turn off and you lose the trust. As a therapist, you don't want to lose the trust with people. You don't want to compromise their own personal integrity.
Yeah, it's about that connection. And by the way, Mike, I want to say before, and thank you everybody. We're 1 past the hour. Please join us again on September 4th with Don Feeney. Register on the UNC Behavioral Health Springboard website. So thanks everybody.
And everybody go to smartrecovery.org and find out more.
There you go. And what I want to say is it's about connecting, as you're saying too, Mike. So agreed on that as well. So I thank everybody. Oh, we've got one more. Do you have a minute? I'm sorry.
Sure, I got it as long time as you want.
Okay, let's see here. We got another. Yeah, thank you for, just some thank yous, and I think that's it. So, okay, Mike, hey, thanks. Very interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and
appreciate it. Getting the word out. And like I say, if any treatment facility wants me to do some training there, I can do that. And frankly, I can go more in detail about the tools, therapeutic tools like the ABCs. I didn't want to cover that area, which I knew you covered 2 weeks ago.
Right. Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure working with you again, and I'm sure we'll work again in the future. Okay. Have a great day and a great week. Yes, sir. Okay. Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.